Right, so the recording has started anyway. So yeah.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm just going to wait a couple of minutes or half a minute just for people to filter through, because I think it takes a while for everybody to come through from the waiting room to the session. So we'll just give it half a minute or so and then we'll start. Okay, I think the number's settled now on 27. Okay, so welcome everybody, and thank you very much for joining our session today. Omar, if you could just share your screen for the first slide, please.
Yeah.
So yeah, just some housekeeping for today's session. As you'll be aware, we are talking to you today about everything you need to know for preparing a creative portfolio. I'm Sash Baku from Goldsmiths University of London. On the call, we also have Darren Murphy from LIPA, Liverpool Institute of Performing Arts, Sarah Charles from Arts University Bournemouth, and Omar Trawali from Leeds Art University. So we'll spend the start of the session by going through what all the kind of everything you can imagine you need to be aware of before submitting and thinking about a portfolio. And then at the end of the session, we'll each very briefly talk to you about our institutions for a minute or so, and then there'll be some time at the end for some Q&A. But yeah, we'll get started now. If you have any questions along the way, of course, pop them in the chat box and we'll take them at the end as well. Some of it might be covered during the presentation. So we'll start now.
Right, thank you, Sash. So my name is Omar Trawali from Leeds Art University. I'm an international officer, so I will start with going to what we think a portfolio is really. So right, what is a portfolio? So different definitions of what a portfolio is. Different institutions have different definitions. You know, individuals as well. So some of them are a portfolio is an edited collection of an artist's best artwork intended to showcase their style or method of work. So which helps institutions or even employers to evaluate their potentials. Some might say a portfolio is used by an artist to show institutions as well, you know, their adaptability by showing different samples of current work as well. Or you could say a portfolio is a carefully curated collection of your work, you know, which means institutions just don't want the work that you produce, but to also express why you're suited for the course. So a well-selected images and personal statement says a lot, obviously, about an artist and their work. So in a student's portfolio and a personal statement, so most institutions would expect students to show or express their enthusiasm and engagement in the subject area that they are applying for. So this could be what you have been watching or making, you know, events you may have attended as well. So to go through a little bit further, we'll discuss some, you know, idea development. You know, what's your creative journey? We'll also give a bit of an example of some technical abilities and how, you know, do you actually create technical work, and also influences as well, or you know, who inspires you in what your project is as well. Right. So idea development. So for this one, you know, for some that might not know what an artistic sort of journey is, so we could say a personal artistic journey is how artists explore and transport their ideas, you know, the evaluation of their practice over time as well. So, you know, sometimes we might ask, you know, how do I start a creative journey, you know, as a student? You know, where do I start? You know, you can explore different avenues. You know, as so often people do limit themselves because they've never done something different. So you have to explore. Um, for example, sketchbooks, you know, mood boards. You know, step out of your comfort zone and explore new ideas, which means experimentation. Try and experiment. So every example that you actually use, every sort of idea that you have, just experiment it on a little project and see how it turns out. So until you get all your ideas on paper, everything you do, try and record it to make sure that you can go back to it. Take it step by step with your ideas and don't rush through your work as well, which is a good idea to have. Stay open to new inspirations and always remember there's no right path, as every practicing artist is different anyway. So risk taking it's a good one as well, because you have to, which is part of experimentation, because every experiment is part of the risk. Moving on to some of the technical ideas that I was talking about. Some samples are here. You can see some of the drafts. Moving on, but the technical portfolio is a key element of your work anyway. So it is an opportunity to showcase your style through the projects you have worked on, and show prospective institutions just what you are capable of doing. There are several portfolio templates students can choose from online if you wish to, but you can build one from scratch to show off your technical skills by yourself. So how do you create? So there's some examples that I've kind of got down for you guys, which is understand your audience. So if you're applying for something, for example, you're applying for fashion design or graphic design, know the audience, know that the portfolio is going to be seen by a professional. So ensure that you know what sort of materials to use. Tell a story. So the portfolio should be telling a story. Should be easy. Information with every material to actually justify what you're trying to portray. Simplify the experience as well. Don't make it too difficult. Just simplify everything you did. The best artworks are the ones that are very, very simple. Use categories, which means segregating, make it consistent. Highlight your best work. So always start with your best work and always end with your best work. So there's always a best start, middle, and an end. Yeah, so make it stand out as well. Unique experience. By doing that with some personal projects, most artists use influences, which means who inspires you to actually do that sort of project. So artists are inspired by many things. So which means you may be inspired by nature to create your work, or your surroundings, books that you're reading, or you've read previously, magazines, movies that you've watched, television shows. It could be something as simple as music, travel emotions, if you've been traveling, memories that from your sketchbooks, other artists as well. For example, alumni from your the institution that you're actually applying to, and their artworks as well. So it's endless. The actual list is absolutely endless. Collaborative work is another one, which means that you're working as a team to do a project that could inspire you to actually showcase your work. Every institution wants you to actually show them your character, because every artist should have one to ensure that you're unique in what you're trying to create. So that's the end of my sort of session in trying to tell you what portfolios and what you can include. So what I'll do now is I'll now introduce my colleague Sarah Charles from Arts University Bournemouth to go through what to include in a portfolio. Thank you.
Thanks, Omar. I have to say, I love that last slide. I think that Superwoman going through the air is absolutely brilliant. Love it. Okay, so thank you again, as my colleague said, for joining us for this session. I'm going to go through a few slides about the sorts of mechanics of a portfolio, if you like. But the most important thing to say is probably that you've got a selection of universities here, and they will all have similarities. There'll all be things that we do, that are quite similar. But there will also be differences. So you really need to look at the guidelines that the university has and make sure before you do anything, you look at those and look at as much information as you can, talk to your teachers, look at some of the examples of work like the ones Omar has just shown you, so that you can do the best job you possibly can. Anyway, mechanics wise, you need about 15 to 20 pieces. And again, this is an Arts University guideline, but any less than that, and it's difficult to tell, what your ideas are and what direction you're taking. Any more than that, and because for some courses we get a lot of applications, you might find that your best piece is at number 22 and we don't actually see it. So best to stick within those guidelines, make sure you do what you're asked to do is really important. Make it a mixture of 2D work, so drawing, sketches, collages, the sorts of things you will have already in your sketchbooks or perhaps finished pieces, but also 3D work. So if you've been working on models or perhaps garments, perhaps costume or fashion or sculptures or even installations, take pictures of those, and you can put those in your portfolio, but do make sure you take good pictures, and I'm sure somebody will be talking about that a bit later. You can also use photography to show what's inspired you. Maybe, you know, you're an architect potentially, and you've been out and you've looked at environments, built environments or landscapes. So we want to see those as well, the kinds of things that you observe that inspire you every day. Also digital, of course, we live in a digital world, and so anything that you've got, you know, that perhaps it's graphic or drawings, animations, perhaps you've got short films, a little show reel, all of those things can go in your portfolio. Next slide, please. And sketchbooks, again, as Omar said, we love to see your ideas, and sketchbooks are the perfect place for these to be shown. So what you can do is you can scan those in, you can use the ideas to show us how you've gone through the process of developing your idea from the raw sort of start where you began right through to the end, and show us how you resolved it, and perhaps the challenges you faced along the way, because what that shows us is how you problem solve. So we want to see that as well. The other thing this might do is support the finished pieces. Because all portfolios now are digital, we need to understand sometimes the context, because as much as you understand where the piece came from, we might not. So what your sketchbook can do is support that idea or that finished piece. It's absolutely okay to use digital sketchbooks. So if you're working in a blog, that's absolutely fine. Just make sure that you include the link and that it all makes sense, that it's a logical progression of your ideas through to the finished piece. Thank you. Life drawing is important for most disciplines, but again, I would urge you to look at the guidelines of each course and each university, but think of it very loosely. Don't start worrying that you can't do a particular style of drawing. It may be that you draw with stitch, like this example on the left here, or perhaps you've done some wire pieces. It really doesn't matter. Or maybe technical drawings, if perhaps it's architecture or interiors that you're interested in. So think about it loosely, but do include some drawing, just so we can see how your hand-eye coordination works. Thank you. And this is just a final slide to show perhaps an example of an illustration student or animation student, just to show how drawing can be displayed in perhaps a zine. And it's beautifully done, and it shows all the different dimensions and different angles that this student has produced this lovely piece of work. Thank you. That's me done, I think.
Yes, that's you. Yeah, that's done. Thank you very much, Sarah.
Thanks very much, Sarah. Hello, everyone. So yeah, having a look at how to present your portfolio, and this is really, really key. So first of all, let's take a look at diverse photographs. If you can try and show a range of different media, materials, perspectives, techniques, and type of photography work. For example, some people just consider digital photography. Perhaps think about exploring analog photography. When looking at images, remember quality, quality, quality. And this means nothing blurry and everything digestible. It's important to note that this does not mean that all your work needs to be polished works of art. Remember, perfecting your work is not the be-all and end-all of your portfolio. Don't be afraid to show some unfinished pieces of work and research and development of ideas. But remember, we need to see all the images very clearly. And essentially, that's what the academics will be looking at, and the admission students will be looking at, is what you're showing us. So it needs to be clear. Subtle labeling. Things to think about when it comes to labeling would be size, media, and a short and snappy summaries if required, but not reams and lines of text. If your pieces need a lot of text to explain your work, perhaps have a rethink about what you're submitting and how you're presenting your work. But in the same breath, it's important to explain your vision. Labeling your work guides us through your creative process and vision, as well as providing us with context. Storytelling. It's really important to create a strong narrative. Building a story with an impactful beginning and end will ensure you leave a lasting impression. If you can't explain a particular piece of work, perhaps consider not including it. Also, how you edit your work also shows us your ability to work on a project brief, which is a key skill for all creative programs, and will show us that you possess some of the skills to cope with the demands of the programs. When it comes to storytelling, how you tell that story is different depending on what creative course you're applying for. But think about it as an extension of your personal statement. Your work should be telling us a bit more about you, your ideas, and your aspirations. Next slide, please, Omar. Thank you. Take care when taking pictures of your work with lighting, layout, and background. We want to see clear images, but we also want to see work in its context. So that means it's okay to have the edge of a door frame or the floor in the image, because it gives us a sense of scale and we can actually see what the work is made of. Try to avoid cropping everything to the edge of the piece of the work, because sometimes it's very difficult to see what we're looking at. And of course, some parts of a portfolio, it's important to try and use finished pieces alongside development work to give context. Next slide, please, Omar. Thank you. So yeah, when it comes to digital portfolio, you essentially want to make sure that the platform is accessible. General file sharing like Dropbox, Google, Flickr, they all work. What you want to be aware of here is that you want to kind of check whether or not the platform that you're accustomed to using is accessible in the UK, or if you're applying to another country's institution. Because, for example, there are some sites internationally that are available in some countries, but not in others. So make sure the file sharing site that you're using is available in the UK. You can use YouTube or Vimeo for moving pictures. It's always great to showcase your work through sites like Instagram or Behance or other website domains. And remember, try it out on different computer systems and different browsers. For example, a lot of institutions have issues on either Google, or some will have it on Safari, or some will have it on Firefox. So make sure your portfolio is accessible across all those different browsers, because some institutions have issues accessing it depending on browser and computer system. Make sure there's no password or login required, and make it user-friendly. Take care with large files, and if you do have any large files, don't forget to zip them. Essentially, when you're building your digital portfolio, you want to just make it as accessible, easy to digest, and user-friendly as possible. That's me. Thank you. I'll pass you over to my colleague.
Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Darren from Liverpool Institute for Performing Arts, and I deal with performers a lot. So for performing arts courses such as music or acting, you'll be asked to submit a digital audition, and this could be pre-recorded videos of you performing alongside pieces of work that you've previously recorded. What we ask tends to differ by course and by instrument. But as Sarah was saying, read the guidelines that you've been sent. Most of us in the world of the creative arts will send out guidelines for what we're asking for in terms of the portfolio. Read those guidelines once, read them again, read them with a friend or a teacher to make sure that your understanding is the same as their understanding. And if you've got different viewpoints as to what's being asked. Ask the institution. People like all of us who work with international students want you to do well. Though different institutions do have very different requests. Okay, so on our website, we will give very detailed information. Other people may just say, select a portfolio of 15 pieces, but we will be very prescriptive in terms of what we're asking for. Next slide, Omar. So there are common mistakes that you can make, and that's first one is like a lack of academic rigor. You've got to demonstrate that methodology, that research, the planning, and the idea generation. We want to see how you've reached that final piece of artwork or that final piece of music. So the concepts and ideas and your thinking is really important to us. So if something looks good, we want to know how you got there, what's going on, what's the context. That's a word that you've heard a few times now. Why have you made those choices that you've made? Okay. So explain your work. Tell us what's going on there. Why have you done this from this particular angle, from this particular perspective? Why have you chosen those particular colors or that particular palette? Why have you chosen to write in this particular genre? What does it mean to you? What does it say about you? And another thing is just making up the numbers. Everyone's talked about a strong start and a strong finish. And I would say that is definitely the case with, say, music portfolio. It's not a gig where you save your favorite song that the audience likes till last. We want to be hit with something that's going to make an impact early on. So don't put in pieces that you're not particularly proud of, just build up that number of pieces. Okay, if you need to create new work, create new work. This is an important thing that you're doing. Don't just put fillers in. Next slide, please, Omar. So that's again, check the website for guidance. Your individual personal statement should be exactly that. It should be personal and individual. Sometimes when you're reading statements, it's like you've read this one before. And I think sometimes you can be over-guided and over-coached. We do actually want to hear about you. We're going to spend a year or 3 years or 4 years with you. We want to know what you're about, how you are as an individual, just in terms of your personality, but also your artistry as well. So don't be afraid of showing yourself, and show a variety of your work. Lots of young people will be working in different genres, they'll be working in different styles. We don't expect you to be the finished product. We don't expect you to be a world-class artist. You're embarking on a journey where we're trying to help you to get to where you want to be. So we realize that your ideas may not be fully formed, but we want to hear about those ideas. So quality is important, not quantity. And we talked about selecting your best work. And I know of examples where students for our theatre design course have come along to interviews with only like 1 or 2 images, but they've been incredibly strong, and the students have been able to talk to them and give a detailed description of the creative process and their ideas. So, as we said, photograph large pieces. An idea of scale is quite helpful to us. Caption work, short statement, 1 line to explain what the project is about. So try and keep that concise as possible. And again, create an accessible platform link for digital submissions. The number of times I chase academics for an answer on a portfolio, and it turns out that they're just having technical problems opening links or dealing with passwords. So yeah, make sure things are accessible. Next slide, please. Interviews, again, we are interested in you. Be yourself. Don't give the answers that you think are the correct answers. Answer the question. Listen to the question. We know that face-to-face or even online that you're nervous, and we can make allowances for that. But listen to what is being asked for of you. Don't make things up. Once you start doing that, you'll forget where you are, and it'll become very obvious, very clearly, that you are out of your depth. So if you don't know anything, just say, I don't know. We are actually trying to find out what you do know, what you're capable of, and also what areas you feel you need to work on. So it's not a mistake, or you shouldn't feel bad if you don't know the answer. We're just finding out more about you. It's something that quite a lot of artists find difficult, is to talk about your work. But you've got to practice that. You've got to speak to other people about your work. So go through your portfolio and explain what you were trying to achieve, how you went about it, what your aim was, even if you've not fully met those aims. But you must be able to talk about your work, and don't be afraid to criticize your own work as well, and say, well, I don't think that if I had to do this task again, I would do it in the same way. We like that. We like the fact that you are aware and can criticize your own work, but also remember that it's a two-way process as well. And an interview is an opportunity to find out whether or not the institution you're applying for is the right institution for you, whether or not the course is exactly what you want. So please don't be afraid to ask questions. And overall, just be yourself. So I think I'm done on that one, Omar, or am I, have I got a slide?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you done, Darren. I think this is slide 17. I believe this is one of the slides just to talk about the universities, basically. But I'll let Sasha, just introduce us all, I believe.
Oh yes, sorry, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is where we are all on the map. I mean, I'll talk to you about where we are. So Goldsmiths University of London, is obviously in London, down in the southeast of England. Should we all just go around and say where our institutions are?
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't know I was doing this slide.
Yeah, I'll start with Sarah.
Yeah, we are right down where you can see the director's chair down at the bottom of the map, right on the south coast. We're closer to France than we are to Scotland, if that gives you an idea.
Yeah. Glasgow School of Art.
Be right at the top there.
Right at the top, yeah.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. Goldsmiths. Well, Sash, you've already talked about that anyway. Leeds Arts University. We are actually right in the middle there, in between Manchester, Bradford, and Leeds. That little dot. So the north of England.
And Liverpool is where the two mass are, the happy and the sad mass, and we're in the northwest of England on the coast.
And then you've also got Loughborough University, which is in between where Goldsmiths is in London, and in between LIPA and Leeds Art University. So that's just in between Nottingham and Birmingham. It's Loughborough.
Yeah.
And then you've got Norwich University of Arts, right by the lovely seaside on the east coast. And then right at the bottom of your screen, you will find Arts University Bournemouth. Again, a lovely seaside university. So that is where we all are.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah,
Okay, and alphabetically, I think I'm first, Arts University Bournemouth. So we've been going quite a long time, about 130 years and counting, as a specialist creative arts university. We're quite small, so less than 4,000 students. But I think this year we're welcoming students from nearly 60 different countries. So it really is a diverse, multicultural campus that we're on. Well equipped, as you would expect, with some high-tech studios and workshops. The top picture here is actually our drawing studio, which is, I think, the only one to have been built in the last 100 years, designed specifically for drawing. And you're just as likely to see in there animation students drawing dance students as you are to see fine art students in a life drawing class. So it's a fantastic space and a great looking building. We've got some fantastic accolades. First place for career prospects from The Guardian 2019. We have the Gold Excellence Framework Award, and we're in the top 5 of all UK universities for teaching quality and student experience, according to the Sunday Times. So the students like what we do. Our teachers and technicians are experts in their field, and quite often they've either worked in industry or are still working in the creative industries and bring all that into the classroom. We're ranked as the top specialist art and design university by the Sunday Times Good University Guide 2021. And we're also very proud to be the home of the Bournemouth Film School. And this is one of the oldest film schools outside of London. And what this does is it brings together in a collaborative way 10 different courses across film, animation, costume, creative writing, VFX, and they all work together to create this kind of mirror effect, if you like, of the film industry, and really gets you prepared for that sort of networking that you need in that film industry. So that's us in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Hi, we're relatively new. We were only opened in 1996, and we were co-founded by Sir Paul McCartney, who was in a band called the Beatles, and we're tiny, only 1,000 students. But again, we've got 50 plus nationalities there, and 25% of our student body are international students. We're very much industry focused and we're very collaborative. So we have lots of students who perform, actors, dancers, musicians, but actually more students who are people who make performance possible. So the designers, the technologists, the filmmakers, artist management, sound technicians, and everybody is working to create performance or to create art. So it's really like replicating the real world of the performing arts. So for an acting performance, for example, you've got set designers, you've got costume makers, sound technicians, maybe students performing the music, and then even down to things like the box office being managed by management students, the marketing for that being done by management students as well. And Liverpool's famously a very cultural city, and it's very diverse as well, as many ports are within the UK. It's home to the oldest Chinese community in Europe, and it really is a place where people can create things. I think what you do find is that in the smaller cities of the UK, it is possible to make and create in a way that sometimes isn't possible in larger metropolises. As one of our students says, Liverpool as a port city isn't fully built yet. There are lots of empty warehouses where students will be creating work outside of the curriculum, doing things not just in the classroom, in the institute, but actually taking things out into the city. And I think that's a very valuable experience. Okay, that's us.
Thank you, Dan. think that's that.
Thanks, Darren. So just a very quick whistle-stop tour of Goldsmiths University of London. So we have a long and rich history. We were founded in 1891, and we became part of the University of London and have been known as Goldsmiths University of London since 1904. Now, studying at Goldsmiths means that you'll be part of the University of London, which is a federation of 17 independent institutions ranging from large institutions such as King's College London to much more specialised institutions such as the Royal Veterinary College. The benefits of studying at the University of London institution is that obviously you graduate with your Goldsmiths degree, which has great weighting, but you also graduate with that University of London weighting as well, which carries great recognition around the world. But it also means that you have access to more shared facilities. So as part of the University of London, you have access to additional libraries across London. So for example, you have access to the Senate House Library, which is one of the UK's largest academic libraries, and Central Library to the University of London and Advanced School of Study. So where we are a single site campus based in the heart of Southeast London. Now, a single site campus means that all of our lectures, seminars, teaching spaces, cafes, etc., they're all in the same vicinity, they're all in the same area, which is something of a rarity for a London institution because of how densely populated London is. And how hard space and areas are to come by. So as a consequence, a lot, not all, but a lot of London institutions have buildings and campuses spread out all over London. We find that Goldsmiths having this single site campus really creates this sense of student community that sometimes you don't get at London institutions, which is a great benefit of our campus. In terms of proximity to where we are in London and where we are to central London, we are in the heart of southeast London in a place called New Cross. Now, New Cross, from New Cross Station, which is our local station, takes 8 to 10 minutes by train to get to London Bridge. And it's just one stop, just to give you an idea of how close we are to central London. The area that we're in, New Cross, of course, has its values. I won't bore you with what London has to offer. I'm sure you'll all be familiar with the benefits of London. But in our area, in New Cross, it's a really kind of creating, thriving, and kind of quirky area of London. It's been described by the New York Times as the creative hub of London. We have around 10,000 students on campus from over 130 countries. Around 15 to 20% of these students are overseas, so there's a real sense of international spirit at the university. I won't go through all the rankings, but just to give you an idea, we're one of the UK's top creative and political universities. We were this year in the QS World University Rankings by subject. We were ranked 15th in the world for art and design. We've included this Going Green committed to becoming a carbon neutral organisation by 2025, just because it gives you a sense of who we are at Goldsmiths. We're a very socially, environmentally and politically aware and driven university who wants to have a positive impact for our students and for the wider community and world. So for example, some of our Going Green initiatives includes removing all beef products from sale from campus, in 2019, introducing an additional 10p levy on bottled water and single-use plastic cups to discourage use, switching to 100% clean energy supplier as soon as practicable. So those are just some of the initiatives that we have to kind of tackle the current environmental crisis of our time. And then moving on to our focus. So we have a focus on creative arts, entrepreneurial business, computing, psychology, social sciences, and humanities. And it's important to remember that at Goldsmiths, we are not a specialist institution. We are a university who teaches across a multitude of different disciplines, although we are very famed and well known for the creative areas. But one of the benefits of this is that we have a very interdisciplinary in nature in the way that we teach and learn and grow at Goldsmiths. So whilst you may be studying a program like design or art, we always try to bring in expertise and ideas from our other departments. So for example, when we look at design, we might be looking at it from a sociological point of view, a management and psychological point of view, and we try to bring in those expertise to inform on how we're thinking and what we're teaching. We have some really influential and famed alumni, and of course, like all great practicing artists and designers, a lot of them would have studied at a lot of different other universities, some of which are here in the session today, I believe, and of course across the other events. But just to name a few, we have the Oscar winner Steve McQueen, the famous fashion designers Mary Quant and Vivienne Westwood, Damien Hirst, who was one of the most famed British artists, and I think he also studied at Omar's University as well, and many more. So yeah, that's a whistle-stop tour of Goldsmiths. I'll hand you over now to Omar.
Thank you, Sas. Yeah, I'll go through these as well. So we are Leeds Arts University. So Leeds Arts University is the only specialist arts university in the north of England. So compared to the other specialist arts universities, who are actually spread out. So which means we only take the arts, and throughout the years, obviously, we've developed a vast number of creative professionals, for example, fashion designers, filmmakers, etc. So students will get the opportunity to collaborate across all of our courses in exciting projects as well. So we enhance their practice and development, develop their creative connections as well. So just like the other universities that we just heard just now, so we are also very small and but also friendly and supportive. And that's why we pride ourselves on the support we give to every single student due to the size that we are. So you'll get to know your professors on a personal level. And we've got something called an open door policy, which means there's help whenever you need it. So there's no appointments or anything. You need the international team or the welfare team, the careers team, your teachers. Just go and knock into their offices and they'll be ready to help. So we actually believe that this unique approach is why we were ranked #1 for student support in the WASC Awards and in 2020. So which the university is really proud of. When I signed up and joined, that was the first thing that they showed me actually. So we also received an 87% satisfaction rating in the National Student Survey, which is the highest ranking for any specialist university really. Going towards alumni, which Sasha just mentioned, one of our alumni is Damien Hirst. He's a most prominent member of the Young British Artists and one of the highest earning living artists in the world, basically. So that just shows you the artistic world, not just for us, but within the UK as well. And we've also got Barbara Hepworth, who is an artist and sculptor. So we're one of the few female artists of our generation to gain prominence. Some of our work is still being showcased in some of our galleries in Leeds. Henry Moore. So Henry was born and bred in Leeds, in Yorkshire. He's one of the most revered sculptors of his time, actually. So Moore, he's actually left his legacy all around the world in the form of his iconic bronze statues, which can be found in the Moors of the Yorkshire Sculpture Park, which most of our students tend to visit. They use it as an inspirational sort of site to start their projects. We've got people around the world that come and view it. So all the way in the heart of Hong Kong as well, in the Central District, you will find most iconic bronze statues over there as well. So just talking about a little bit about Leeds as well, where we are. So Leeds is a city in the county of West Yorkshire. It's obviously in England. So it is around 2 hours, 2.5 hours north of London, via train, and also 2.5 hours from Edinburgh in Scotland. So that this students tend to try and do certain visits. It just shows you that it's not a long trip. So it is the third largest city in the UK behind London and Manchester, with some world-renowned companies, and we've got some TV stations in Leeds. So which means opportunities for employment is actually vast for students. So Leeds is the cultural, financial and commercial heart of the West Yorkshire built-up area. So we've got a reported population of just over 780,000. So there's plenty to see and do, so lots of events because we've got quite a lot of universities within the area, and festivals to attend to. We've got fantastic nightlife for students in terms of nightclubs, bars, restaurants, cinemas. Toulouse was named the UK's best student city by the Independent as it's friendly, diverse, and rapidly growing city. So it's a very vibrant city with a young student population and a thriving art scene because we've got quite a lot of art galleries for students to use as well. So moving on to facilities of what we've got. We've in LAU we've actually invested over 22 million in a huge refurbishment of the site, which was completed back in 2019. So we have won the What Uni Student Choice Award for Best Facilities 3 times, and the last one being in 2020 as well. So you will have access as a student of our state-of-the-art resources. So these will include specialist workshops, computer suites, build up with Max, libraries, print areas, 3D animation studios that we've got, fashion studios, photographic studios, filmmaking, and we've also got a 230-seated music auditorium for our music students as well to use for practice sessions as well as live events that they do normally have. We've also got a state-of-the-art public exhibition gallery for our students. So that means that every work that you produce, it will be there for the general public to come and have a view. And all these facilities are equipped to industry standard as well. So you'll be able to produce work that meets or exceeds the demands of modern practice in art and design. So all these fantastic opportunities that you heard, I'm sure most of the universities that you've just heard as well will have all these sort of fantastic facilities for upcoming students, especially international students. Yeah, so that's it for me. Thank you very much for listening. I'll pass it back to Sash.
Thank you very much, Omar. So just before we move on to taking some of the questions in the chat, just to reiterate the point that Sarah made earlier, of course, the guidance that we've given you here today is on the whole very, very much applicable to everybody, but there will be slight nuances, slight differences between all the different requirements. So it's important to have a look on the websites here that we've listed for the specific portfolio requirements. One university may ask 15 pieces, another may ask for 20. So just have a look at the small nuances, but generally, more or less, the principles should apply to all the different universities. So let's have a look at some of the questions that have come through in the last 10 minutes that we have here. Thank you, Sarah, for already answering one in the chat. So is the portfolio requirement for foundation courses the same as for undergraduate courses? Again, this is really going to vary according to different programs and according to different universities. On the whole, the expectation for an undergraduate program is going to be slightly more. We most likely are going to want to see more developed pieces of work to kind of to justify that advanced year of entry. So again, it's best to check the individual course pages, foundation courses, extension programs, and straight BA programs to see the differences. But generally, they're going to be slightly different, and there's going to be more expectation in the undergraduate programs. I'm not sure if anybody else has anything to add there before we move on to the next question. Okay. Can these links be sent to us by email? Yes, we're recording this session, and all the information will be posted online on YouTube, I think it is, and we'll share links to these after the sessions, so perhaps later on today or early next week. So what is the minimum amount of art work supposed to be in the profile? So again, this is going to really vary depending on institutions. Generally, as a rule of thumb, it's around 15 to 20. Some may ask for 10, some may ask for 25. But as long as I think when you're thinking about kind of the minimum amount of work, don't think of it as being too prescriptive. Think of it as a case of what am I putting? What am I putting across? Does it tell enough about what I'm trying to show the institution? And is it manageable for them to digest, considering how many applications they're going to receive? So just imagine you were looking at it and you had no idea about your work, and try and imagine it blank, or try and get someone else someone who hasn't seen your work before you submit it, and say, is that digestible? Can you understand what I'm trying to say and what I'm trying to get across? So don't think about it in terms of, you know, minimum, maximum, and being too kind of hard and fast with the rules. Of course, follow the guidelines, but try and think about it practically. And again, I'm not sure if anybody has anything to add there. If not, I will move on to the next question. Yes.
I was only going to say, I think that was really good advice to get somebody else to look at it, but make sure it's not somebody who's just going to say, oh yes, it's lovely. Get somebody who you think, you know, may be a bit critical, somebody who will say to you, well, actually, maybe you could think about it in a different way. That was the only thing I was going to add.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, great piece of advice. Yeah, maybe a teacher, perhaps another friend who's doing art with you that can be kind of constructively critical about your work. But yeah, great point. Thanks, Sarah. If our paintings have abusive language to depict a certain emotion in the painting, is it okay, or would it be an issue? I'm going to answer for Goldsmiths here, and I think we will all answer for our own institution. For Goldsmiths, that's absolutely fine. It's Goldsmiths, we are looking for those students who are breaking the mold, who are not free to express themselves in any way, shape, or form that they like. So that's absolutely fine for art and design programs at Goldsmiths, as long as it's kind of, you know, it's telling us something and it's not abusive for the sake of being abusive. That's absolutely fine. I believe might be the case for the other institutions. I mean, obviously, you be aware of cultural sensitivities. That's the only thing that I would be kind of aware of if you are going to put abusive language. Be aware of cultural sensitivities. But if it's trying to express something and an idea, that at Goldsmiths, that's fine.
Yes,
I would just say on that, you know, don't try to shock us just for the sake of trying to shock us. I mean, we won't shock easily. So I would be cautious on that. If it's absolutely key to what you're trying to present, then yes, but you know, for shock value, don't bother.
Yes, sorry, it's Omar, Leeds Arts University. Yeah, we do encourage students to be themselves as well. We actually have a column about some of these sort of work that come in. Just be like what Sas said, just be sensitive in a little bit in regards to culture as well, depending on what the abusive language is. I mean, if it's something that can't be used, then obviously we will let you know. But yeah, just be yourself. We can't really be shocked that much because we've seen quite a lot of different sort of work. But yeah, just be mindful of the language as well. If it's something that's really not politically correct, obviously it can't be used really. But it all depends on what the abusive language is.
No, I'll add to that, all of that that my colleagues have said. I think just be sensitive to anything that somebody else might find, you know, culturally offensive or just generally offensive. But at the end of the day, for anybody who does art makes sense of the world. So how you see it, how you observe it, whether that's politically, socially, you know, the natural world, I think that's what art does. So do use it as a way to express, but just, you know, sensitivity is important too.
Thank you.
Could I answer the question from Giovanni Correa? And it's about using a language other than English in your portfolio. And I think that, you know, I come across this quite often with music, with people whose lyrics and whose voice is other than in English. I think translations into English are useful. I think it's always useful as well to show that you are willing to use English as the medium of your work, because I hesitate because I think that some teachers might think, well, am I going to struggle for, 3 or 4 years? So I would say show that you are willing to work outside of your native language. But I think if the animations are strong enough to give a sense of what is happening, then no, you wouldn't need to translate word for word. And I think the question to ask yourself is to turn it on yourself. Well, if this language was in Wolof, in an African language I didn't understand, would the animation make sense to me? So ask yourself the question of whether or not the language is so key that it would require a translation.
Thanks, Darren. So just a good question here from Tara. Should the portfolio be complete by the time of application, or is there time to work on it after applying? That's a good question. So again, it's going to vary. I think for the vast majority of undergraduate programs, we can accept an application after the UCAS submission. That's the case for Goldsmiths, for both our design and our art programs, and the vast majority of our creative programs. Just go through, is that the case for everybody else as well?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, brilliant. So yeah, Tara, you can submit your application, either UCAS or if any of the universities accept direct entry, and then you can develop and continue to work on your portfolio. And once you normally receive an email from the admissions team requesting the portfolio, and at that point they'll give you a deadline by the time you need to normally send it through. But good question. Okay, so a question for you, Sarah, actually, for University of Arts Bournemouth, are there different portfolio requirements for foundations?
Yes and no. We still want to see all those things we've been talking about in the presentation. So ideas generation, resolved pieces, but perhaps for the foundation, it's a broader approach to art, design, media, whatever that is. Whereas for a degree program, we would expect to see some focus on the subject of choice or area of choice. So yeah, I think it's just a sort of progression from one to the other, but similar approaches.
Thanks, Sarah. An interesting question here from Tara Teo. Will most unis require us to follow a particular coherence, like a common theme or a common thread between portfolio work, or can we send in any artwork we've done? I think for the vast majority of us here, and this is kind of what we touched on in the presentation, you want to be in your portfolio, you want to be showing us ideas, idea generation, themes that are interesting for you that perhaps you want to take further at university level, central kind of ideas and concerns that are key to you and your practice. However, in the same breath, if there is other pieces of artwork that you've done in your schooling system, for example, that show us a particular skill set or a particular ability, for a technical ability or ability to work to a project brief, that's fine to include, but it shouldn't dominate your portfolio. Your portfolio for the vast majority of the time should be centralized around kind of ideas or themes. It doesn't have to be one, it can be a multiple multitude of different themes, but it should be kind of focused around that kind of concept of ideas and concepts. And if you want, you can throw in a kind of artwork that you've done at school to showcase. As long as it's showcasing something and telling us something about you, that's the most important thing. But it's not to say that you have to go completely one or the other. I'm not sure if anybody else has anything to add. Otherwise, we'll take just the last couple of questions.
Excellent.
If I translated my work, would this translation give me a higher chance of being accepted to university? I think Sarah answered this in the chat. But yeah, essentially, as long as you're getting across the message and you're translating the keywords that we need to be aware of, that's fine. We don't want to kind of see a whole portfolio in a foreign language that we can't understand. So to do translate where you think it's necessary for the admissions tutor to understand what you're trying to say. question for you, Darren, in particular. I'm taking fine arts in the IB course. What would my portfolio for performance design?
Yeah, I mean, we would like to see your sketch work, as we want to see, you know, the work that you do with your hands, but we would look for, you know, at least 1 or 2 examples of where your design has been part of a performance, be it lighting design for a dance show or set design, or, I mean, and examples are people who've made over spaces for the school disco even, but we'd like to see work in a 3D context that you can film or photograph. At least 1 or 2 examples of that. But we do realize that lots of people haven't had that opportunity as yet in their life to design a set for a musical production. So yeah.
Great. Thank you, Darren. Just very quickly, last question. I think we've covered everything now. So for a fashion course, how much is the portfolio worth in terms of admissions compared to our academics and IB scores? So we'll speak generally about this in terms of academics versus portfolios. You should all be aiming to reach the minimum entry requirements that every university sets, whether that's IB, whether it's A-level, whether it's a international equivalent. You should all be aiming to meet that minimum requirement. And a portfolio is obviously a part of the application, as is the assessment of academia. And now we shouldn't be aiming below that, but in some cases, for some courses, depending on spaces, there may be a scope to accept you with a slightly lesser kind of academic achievement if there's spaces left, and if your portfolio and your personal statement and the rest of your applications warrant acceptance onto the program. But do aim to meet the requirements, because that's the best way to give yourself the admission onto the program. So thank you very much, everybody, for your time today, and thanks all the panelists for your amazing presentations. Omar, if you go to the next slide, just very quickly to tell you what else is on.
Yeah.
So next on, so we now have Ask Me Anything, where you can talk to our international students, so do go and see them. And then an hour later on, you have Finding the Best Fit, so finding which university is right for you. But thank you very much for joining today. Take care.
Take care. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Seth. I'll stop recording now.